Welcome to Wealth Strategies Unleashed. I'm Robert Gilliland with Concenture Wealth Management, and with us is
Karen Hyder.
Okay, Karen, we're going to keep this tradition going. Any good dad jokes?
I have what I think is a phenomenal joke this week, actually. You ready for this
We
one?
will be the judge.
Okay. What do you call an alien with 8 eyes?
I don't know.
Alien. Come on, that's a good one.
We got to work on getting a horn or a wah, wah. Right?
Some kind of buzzer sound or something.
The problem is that I have to think too much about it. Like, how do you spell alien? Oh, okay, now I get
saw
where
your
she
mind
is.
working through that joke. Yeah.
So awesome.
Okay. Well, this week I think I'm going to take over and lead this one a little bit. So one thing that I feel like is a good topic to hit on that has been front and center for us here recently for clients, with everything going on in the market, with as volatile as it's been and everything else, I think risk is a really good topic for us to hit on this week.
Yeah, that is a good topic because markets go up and they go down, mm-hmm. and when markets go down, that's really where you determine where a client's risk is, right? How much mm-hmm. are they willing to take down? And what we find, I think back again. This is going to make me feel old. I think back to a client that I worked with in right before the year 2000, and we were sitting down and reviewing his portfolio that he had just moved in, and I told him, he goes, "Look, my portfolio, I'm very conservative. I have nothing but blue chips. I have them. They're doing great. They're never going to go out of business." Mm-hmm. Inside of the portfolio was Netscape, Enron. It had all these other technology companies, and it had WorldCom. It had all these technology companies, right? And when I looked at it, I said, yes, it's diversified, and at that time, these are blue chips, but do you understand what happens if something happens to one of these companies with your long-term plan? Mm-hmm. And so being sure you can manage, because with this volatility that's going on and this uncertainty, being able to weather those storms and understand the amount of risk that you're taking is vital to portfolio success. Because if you're comfortable with it, you're going to be able to sleep well at night. Mm-hmm. If it keeps you up at night, you're taking way too much risk, right? I think to kind of, when you're looking at this, and I say this often with clients, is a lot of times people get focused on the return. Mm-hmm. Did I beat the market? Or if I didn't, by how much did we not beat the market, and why? And yes, performance is important, but what's more important is the outcome.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes more makes zero difference in your life. Mm-hmm. And if you've already won the game, you don't need to play as hard.
Exactly.
Right? And so when you go through and you think about risk, they're really from our college days. They really talk about two different types of risk, right? There's systemic risk. That is risk that is inside of the market, making sure that you're diversified in there, having stocks, bonds, cash, mm-hmm. right? But then there's the unsystematic risk or unsystemic risk. In other words, it's risk that's not systemic.
Yeah.
That's risk like that have to do with the economy, industry risk, government regulation, that type of risk, things that you really can't control. If you have a portfolio that is all NVIDIA, Amazon, Apple, the Magnificent Seven, you have risk. You have two types of risk there that you're not really controlling. One of them is the unsystemic risk, right? Or the not systemic risk, what you can't control, government regulation, those kind of things. The other you can, and that you can control that through diversification. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times when markets are going up and you have a year like what we had in 2023 when the market's up 23 or 26%,
mm-hmm.
you tend to forget that it can also go down. Yep. And so controlling those two types of risks. Now, the other thing that I think makes sense, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is your personal risk. Mm-hmm. What happens if you need a new roof? What happens if the air conditioning goes out? what sort of protection from risk can you have inside there? And I think that probably the biggest thing that you can go and do is, first and foremost, is make sure you have that emergency fund. There's nothing more boring than talking about an emergency fund.
Yep.
Because it doesn't grow, it doesn't do anything for you. But you have to have that money. And generally speaking, if you have job security, 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses is plenty. Mm-hmm. But if you're in an environment where you don't have job security, maybe longer is better for you to have, yep. Right? Inside there. You need to understand what your investments are doing for you in order to help fulfill or meet any of those risks that may come up. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's vitally important when you're talking about risks on the personal side is to do a review of what do you have, what sort of liability coverage do you have, whether that's an umbrella policy. And that also gives you an opportunity really to kind of shop and maybe even save, but be able to go through there and understand what that is. I think what I'd like to do is walk through kind of a scenario that we have these in various forms, so I'll kind of pull them all together and make up one. Not too long ago, and you'll remember this, we had a client who called and said, hey, look, I'm interested in buying a new business. Mm-hmm. It wasn't so much buying a business. Maybe it's not buying a business. Maybe it's buying a piece of investment property or making a large investment into a business, right? Or, mm-hmm. or buying a new house or a second house or something like that. Some of the things that we kind of walked through and talked through them was, and this is what's bad, is because when you think that, hey, look, I'm going to start this new business, I'm going to make a lot of money, and this is going to be easy, and before you know it, I'll be calling you from my private jet. But to be able to go to look what happens if every day is not a great day mm-hmm. in sales, right? So what you have to do is you have to go through and evaluate, can my assets withstand me having to do significant withdrawals to be able to do it? What about maintaining my lifestyle?
Yep.
Right? You were intimately involved in that. What thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that I think gets pushed to the side or maybe not thought about when the excitement of a new business opportunity comes up, or the idea of purchasing a new house or something, specifically on the business investment side. If you're looking to go buy a business or start a business of your own, you're probably in a situation where for a number of years you were receiving a salary, and of that salary you were putting away savings every year, whether it's through a retirement account or through your own savings. Now you're entering a period of time where your focus is going to be on a new business and you don't have that income stream coming in, and so you likely don't have that dedicated savings happening every year. So conversations need to be had and thought through of, can your portfolio take on, like you said, the withdrawals every year that might be needed to get that business up and going? But can that portfolio continue to grow without additional infusions of your savings every year and still keep you on track to meet your goals? Because like you said, yes, the idea of the business going to grow to where one day you're flying private and you're venturing off to your own island that you've bought sounds great. In reality, have you thought through the number of years of getting the business up off the ground, up and running, and to the successful stage? Because sometimes that can take anywhere from a year to 5 to 10 years.
Right. What
are the impacts to your portfolio in that time frame, and can it sustain that to get your business to the stage of successful?
Yeah, what's a question that a lot of times I'll ask is that if this doesn't work, mm-hmm. and this means that you have to go back to work or work longer, mm-hmm. are you going to be okay with that?
Yeah. And the work longer, man, that's such a tough one to answer, because who wants to go back to work, especially when you have in mind this great business that you think is going to be what gets you to retirement? Having to think through the reality of, if it doesn't work, can you stomach going back to work and working for somebody else to get to the retirement that you want to live?
I think the risk also that you got to be thinking through when you're looking to make these large purchases. Take it away from a business. Think mm-hmm. about it from a standpoint of making a large investment in a private equity,
yeah.
right? Or making a large investment in a piece of real estate. Mm-hmm. The one thing I think is also really important is liquidity.
Yes.
How liquid is that investment? Because if you need cash flow, and cash is king, mm-hmm. If you need cash flow, you have to be able to understand how are you going to be able to access that capital.
Exactly.
Right?
Especially if you look at the private investment side. While these are great and can be a really good strategy for somebody, there are the risks of the liquidity of not being able to access those funds for a number of years, but also the risk of a lot of times those private companies are not reporting quite as frequently as you're used to with your market investment. And so not knowing exactly what your investment is actually worth day to day. So not only is the risk there of not having the liquidity when you need it, you may not also have the most accurate idea of how much your investment is worth until the next reporting period comes up.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, and we'll talk with clients about this, there's one thing, not necessarily on the private equity side, but when it comes to real estate or business ventures, a lot of times we'll talk to people about utilizing credit to help make those investments. And I think the risk in that scenario, if you're taking on a liability, in effect guaranteeing your personal assets for this venture or opportunity, you have to make sure you're really keenly aware of what the interest rate risk is.
Yep.
A different scenario with a client that luckily this ends up with a really great happy story, was that they took a liability, in other words, borrowed, and had a period of time before that came due. And there was some risk that in that time they were in a fixed rate interest rate environment, but after that period of time, I think it was 7 years, it ended up becoming an adjustable rate mortgage. Luckily, they were disciplined to go through to pay down, but had they not had that loan paid off at the end of 7 years, which is not what the bank wanted to have happen, by the way, they would have their cost of capital almost tripled.
Yep.
And so making sure that you're managing that liability and that understanding the interest rate risk.
Yep.
I think also the longevity risk inside of that, right? So how long is this investment, how long is this really going to be able to go and last for?
Yep.
And make sure you have a good idea inside of there. A lot of people are talking about or have talked about purchasing real estate as income. And I think sometimes they don't understand how the cash flow works inside of that. And generally speaking, they end up changing their mind once they dig into it. But
Yep.
you can do well owning real estate, but you have to be keenly aware of what the risks and time risks, right? You could end up being a major sucker of time.
Exactly.
What have we missed?
I think the big thing we're trying to highlight here is that there are a number of risks that sometimes get thought over or not thought through. We're all very familiar with market risk. We're very familiar with timing risk. But I think some of these other types of risks sometimes get pushed to the wayside or not talked about in the timing that they should. So I think what we're trying to reiterate here is just making sure that when you're working with your advisor or someone that you trust, that you are having the conversations and thinking through all types of risks and how they will impact you, so that you're going into these decisions that you're trying to make the most informed you possibly can be. So you're making smart decisions, understanding all the risks that are involved, so that you can appropriately plan for the outcomes.
You know what, Karen, that is exactly right. If you take the rose-colored glasses off and you actually go and look at it almost like an Eeyore, and that outcome, the glass is half empty, that outcome is unacceptable if this fails or it doesn't work or I don't get anything back. And that doesn't change your ability to reach your other goals, then hey, good to go.
Yeah.
Yes, any sort of thing that takes risks, you only take risk if there's a reward, and the higher the risk, the greater the reward. That doesn't mean you don't take risks. It means that you understand what the outcome is and make sure that you're comfortable with what the potential outcome could be, because it doesn't always end perfect.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that's the key. I mean, I think when you're managing a portfolio, when you're managing a portfolio and you're managing your wealth, risk changes. It's dynamic.
Yes.
Right? A client who is taking risk in a portfolio at age 55 might be willing to accept less risk than when they were at 45, and more risk than when they're 65. that may not be the smart thing to do.
Yep.
Right? But making sure you understand where you are and working with a financial professional an advisor or an advisor team that can actually sit down and they understand where you are.
Exactly. And play devil's advocate too. So a lot of times it is very exciting to think through opportunities that, yes, involve risk, but thinking about the rewards of them, having that team or advisor to play the flip side against that and say, like you said, all the possibilities that could happen, being able to have that conversation. It's nice to have someone to make sure that you've thought through both sides of it.
Awesome. Karen, thanks.
Yep.
Be careful this weekend. Don't take unnecessary risks, and please work on your jokes. We're going to need more.
I hope y'all look forward to next week's jokes.
And with that, I want to say thank you for joining us this week on Wealth Strategies Unleashed with Concenture Wealth Management. We'll see you next week.
See you next time.